Okay, so tell me why you haven't started reselling things online yet. I know you love thrifting and I know you've been thinking about it. Hey, my name is Sheena. Welcome to Big Red Resells. Long story short, 9 years ago, I took maternity leave and thought I gotta find a way to make money online so I can stay home with my kids. So I found reselling on eBay, Poshmark, Mercari, and I never looked back. In today's video, I'm gonna break down the basics of reselling, what you need to get started, where to sell it, where to find it, and how to get your first listings up. I'm gonna break this into 2 parts so that you don't get overwhelmed. Today's video is gonna be part 1, and so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss part 2. Part 1 is gonna specifically talk about what you actually need to get started reselling. And then in part 2, I'm gonna walk you step by step through getting your first listings up. Before you even start selling, let's talk about some of the basic supplies that you are going to need. You don't have to spend a ton of money up front, but I promise you having just some of these basic supplies are gonna save you a lot of headaches in the long run. First things first is a basic shipping scale. This does not have to be anything fancy. You can snag one on Amazon for like 20 bucks. I will link the one that I use in the comments as well as everything else that I go over in this video. But a shipping scale is super important. Whether you're shipping on eBay, Poshmark, Mercari, you want to avoid undercharging the buyer and overcharging the buyer because in the end, it's gonna come out of somebody's pocket. Okay, number 2 is poly mailers and boxes. For lightweight items and clothing, poly mailers are your best bet. So you can get plastic quality poly mailers like this on Amazon very reasonably. You can even get the cute ones with the fancy print. I personally like to keep it as cheap as possible. I will go with whatever color is on sale, or basic white is usually the cheapest. But those are great for clothing. Even shoes can go in poly mailers. If you are selling on Poshmark exclusively, you are eligible to use the USPS priority mail prepaid boxes and envelopes. You can get these for free at your post office or order them online at USPS.com. Just make sure that you only get the ones that say priority mail. If you see one that says Priority Mail Express, that is not the one you want to use. You can also use Priority Mail shipping supplies for eBay and Poshmark. You just want to sort of weigh out the costs. Sometimes Priority Mail is a better bet if you can fit it into like a flat rate poly mailer. But a lot of the times, USPS Ground Advantage is the cheaper shipping option. And with Ground Advantage, you cannot use the priority mail marked boxes. It has to be like a basic box or poly mailer. Since you're just getting started, do not go out and spend money on boxes. Start saving your Amazon boxes. Ask your family and friends to start saving their good boxes for you so that you can reuse them. This seems simple, but get yourself some good shipping tape and a tape dispenser. I actually have 2 because I use the eBay branded tape and clear tape. This dispenser cost me $15 and trust me, it's worth it. Lastly, you need a way to be able to print your shipping labels once you've made a sale. A regular printer works just fine when you are just getting started, but if you're in this for the long haul, I highly recommend getting a thermal printer. There's the Dymo and the Rollo are the 2 most common ones. I personally use a Dymo 4XL. I found it on Facebook Marketplace and I have no regrets. I don't have to tape my labels on anymore, and I never have to buy ink. I'm gonna go into a few things that are not physical things you buy, but are more like a system you need to have in place. And I'm gonna include that in this video because it is so important. So this is something I wish I would have done from day one, and so that's why I'm including it in this video. You need to have an inventory system as soon as you start listing your items. What I mean by that is you need to know where your items are stored and how do you keep track of that. For me, it's shelves with bins that are labeled with letters or numbers. It doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to be efficient. There's nothing worse than selling an item and not being able to find it. So trust me, Do this from the beginning, and then what you do is you put that information of where the item is located somewhere in your listing. So that item sells and it tells you right where it's located. Last, and maybe the most important thing that a lot of people avoid or think that they don't need is to keep track of their expenses. You might think you're just starting out doing this for fun, just gonna do it on the side, maybe make a few bucks here and there, but it's still income and you need to be keeping track of it. Especially when it comes tax time, you're not gonna regret this. I'm obviously not a tax professional, but what I'm telling you is you need to keep track of your profits and your losses. So how much you're spending on inventory and supplies, and then you also need to be keeping track of your sales as they start coming in. So that can be a spreadsheet, that can be, honestly, when I first started, I used a notebook. It was messy, I don't recommend it, but if you are into paper and you can keep it organized, at least you have a record of what you're spending and what you're making. And then you can also splurge on a software like QuickBooks. They have one specifically for self-employed people. I'm sure there's more out there, but whatever you do, start keeping track of your expenses from the very beginning. Along those same lines, it's not necessarily required, but I highly recommend that you start a separate bank account, PayPal account for your reselling business. It's better to not mix up business money and personal money. You can transfer from your business account to your personal checking account when you want to get a hold of some of that cash, but it's just better and a lot easier to keep track of things if you make a separate account. It doesn't have to be a business account, it can just be a regular checking account, but one that you strictly only use for your reselling business. Lastly, I'm going to go over a few optional things that are not required, but they kind of are very helpful and they don't cost a ton of money. The first thing is thank you cards or thank you stickers. I personally choose to use just a little thank you sticker that I put on my packaging rather than a card. Handwritten cards are a nice touch, and if that's your thing, do it. But to me, it's just another thing that the customer is just going to end up throwing in the trash. Next is a ring light. You do not have to have a ring light to take great looking photos, but if you are in a house that doesn't have a lot of natural sunlight, or if you're doing your reselling business maybe in the late hours of the night while your kids are asleep and you don't have a lot of light in the house, then a ring light is something that can really help your photos be 100 times better. And nowadays you can find some really good deals on them. I will link the one that I use. I'm actually using it right now in the description below. Again, not required, but it could be something that you want to pick up in the future. Next up is clear poly bags. So this is different than the poly mailers that you're actually shipping your items in. For me, all my clothing and most of my other even hard goods go into a clear plastic poly bag. It sort of just adds an extra layer of protection, and I think that it just looks nice and professional. This is where I also put my thank you sticker on, and this also keeps the item clean and fresh while it's stored in my inventory bin. Since I do store my inventory in the garage, I just feel like they have an extra layer of protection with the clear poly bags. That's really all you need to get started. It doesn't have to be fancy. Use what you have and you can upgrade as you go. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because in part 2 of the video, we're gonna go over the basics of actually getting started and creating your first listings, where and how to find items to resell online, and how to know if they're actually even gonna sell. Let me know what questions you have in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.